Hey everybody, you got your hurtin' hippie with your hippie news, episode 132. It is Sunday, it is shortly afternoon, and I'm having a pretty good day. I'm 4 days away from my son coming home, and the world's looking good. It's not too hot a day. The body isn't too dragged down because of that. So pitter patter. Let's get at it. Let's each have a toke, and let's start with the Canadian news as I usually do. Cheers. As usual, I start with news about Canadian legalization because we're so close. It is already legalized, but the date to start it is October 17. I have said many times, we need, as society is moving closer and closer to legalization, we need to watch out for and question any negative marijuana stories because they're probably pushed from below. They're probably pushed news. They're probably fake news. And I'm going to give you pushed below from pharmaceutical companies. In fact, pharmaceutical companies have started to do some interesting stuff in the background. That's for another news item. My puppy up there. Cookie. Anyways, let's get at this story because the first story is something that is a really good example. Bad word scored. I'm a little bit anxious. Friends, this first story and the story tied to it are great examples of how news is reported and is reported accurately but not wholly, and therefore doesn't tell the story, and in fact tells the opposite story to what is true. Even though they can get by, this is CBC, get by with it being truthful news because they're truthfully reporting it. So, pitter patter, let's get at her. This first story is from the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which really should be center. Anyways, their title, Doctors Want Medical Pot Phased Out After Legalization, Canadian Medical Association, the CMA. Now, just the title alone, first of all, I want to thank all of you followers because these stories come from all of you. It was a question posed to me from a new follower. I don't remember your name and I'm sorry about that. But I asked about this and I said I'd look into it. I didn't believe it in the first place, but that was an initial reaction. Now I've studied it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular story because Jeff Blackmer of the CMA has got to have some pharmaceutical backing, some booze company backing. I have no idea. I don't know that to be the truth, but I've got to say that he is totally on one side of the stigma of cannabis, and you will see that in this story. A very important part. The medical profession as a whole has really struggled with the whole concept of medical cannabis. There's definitely some physicians who feel comfortable in that area, but most don't. Dr. Jeff Blackmer, Vice President of Medical Professionalism for the CMA, told CBC Calgary. And that is primarily because of the lack of evidence, the lack of scientific studies showing it actually works. You see me smiling because I'm kind of upset, and that's how I show it. The lack of knowledge around dosing and interactions with other medications, all these types of things. Our recommendation was that once it's legalized, that there really is no reason for a separate medical system. I dislike this kind of thing because, first of all, CBC is, as you see, reporting it as this is what the medical profession believes. This is what they feel, this is how they feel, and therefore many, many medical people currently on medical cannabis for certain things are worried. Do they have a future? Right now, they're probably pretty happy with their natural medication, being treated as a medical patient, prescriptions. If anything, medical cannabis in Canada needs to grow, become more efficient, become more standardized with other medicines, etc., etc., etc. And you hear this and you think, oh no, what's this government coming up to? And that really, really bothers me because it's not the way we should be going. And this kind of says that it will be going that way. Then we get to this next story. Is marijuana medicine? Doctors are split on the need for separate medical system when pot becomes legal. This is where the rubber meets the road. There are enough physicians now that support marijuana as a medicine, and they've seen the results. Doctors who have actually been in the field and watched babies who react to CBD and THC, seeing cancer survivors surviving, seeing all these changes to people who were terribly depressed who have come out of it, terribly anxious who have come out of it. These people are the ones who know. The CMA, it seems, is many steps back and still dealt into the stigma and the old position of there's not enough evidence, so therefore we should stay away from it. This has always been the case. There's not enough evidence because it's not legalized. Wait till it's legalized and then improve and improve and improve. Not back up and wait for some evidence to happen, because in the meantime you're hurting a lot of medical people. That's Gord. That's Gord's opinion. I didn't even read below. So the medical marijuana industry wants cannabis to be seen as a legitimate medicine, but the Canadian Medical Association argues there's a lack of data to support that. And they go on, this is something that was, I do encourage you to read, not the CBC post unless you want to get a little bit upset, but I'm going to put them both below. But this National Post is probably the best article I've read in a long time, because it presents both sides and allows the reader to make their own opinion. When CMA at this national convention posted their idea that medical marijuana should be phased out, there was, what CBC doesn't report in their article, there was an uproar. The crowd booed Blackmer. And then we go on. Let's move on. The controversy erupted on April 5 at the conference of the Canadian Consortium for the Investigation of Cannabinoids, a non-profit that promotes research on the medical use of marijuana. See, CBC didn't even report that Blackmer was speaking on behalf of the CMA, Canadian Medical Association, at a conference for the betterment of medical marijuana. So they didn't even report the context to which he was there, nor that his story was not well received. We don't think, Blackmer, Vice President of Professionalism with CMA gave a presentation in which he outlined the organization's position that there shouldn't be a separate medical cannabis once pot becomes legal. We don't think that makes any sense, Blackmer told the Post in an interview. People can simply go to a legal source and acquire it there. Let's first stop. If there were a legal place to get your morphine, I guess you'd go there too. But they are only allowing a few of the types of cannabis, concentrates and all that, with some limits to these dispensaries. And they're allowing people to buy there. This shows a real lack of knowledge by Blackmer as to who the people are that are mostly using it, which is teens with anxiety, bad anxiety, finally doing better in life, young kids with epilepsy, seniors with disabilities, seniors and any age with cancer. It goes beyond the 18 and over allowed recreational pot. But it was an unpopular, let's look at the reality, it was an unpopular opinion at a conference focused on the use of it as a medicine. Afterward, Dr. Michael Verboro, medical director with marijuana company Alethea, stood up and asked why Blackmer thought a child with epilepsy should have to buy cannabis from a dispensary. And he didn't really have a good answer for that, Verboro told the Post. The atmosphere in the room quickly became hostile. Dr. Ian Mitchell, an associate professor of emergency medicine at the University of British Columbia, UBC, said an oncologist stood up and said she was ashamed of the Canadian Medical Association, and good for her. Her comments were greeted with cheers, she said, while Blackmer was booed. Verboro said about 10 or 15 people stood to criticize the CMA's position. At one point, someone did mention it was like an ostrich with their head in the ground. So, I'm going to stop there. 1 second, please. And I'm going full screen, and I'm going to just talk to you. And I'm going to say, it's about time, and it's wonderful. I think boo on CBC for their story and the angle they took on it. But this is a really good example of, first of all, an example of the world we're living in now, where the stigma, people speaking about the stigma, the lack of research, the lack of this, the lack of that, are getting called down. There's too much information out there to say that anymore. There's too much information out there to say it at a cannabis consortium. But it isn't going to fly. So I really beg of all of you, you see bad stories about cannabis, question it. Even Google the opposite so that you can, because that's all I did was I put dispute and that title, and boom, I found the National Post, who reported it from a totally different angle. So, and as I pointed out to you, really, you can't call the CBC fake news. They've just taken a different spin, and it's all spin, and it's up to us to try to marry the two and find what the real answer is. Is medical cannabis future in Canada solid? I don't know, but I don't think it's in danger. I'm hoping once legalization goes through that they can turn back and look to making things easier for a family that has a child who has to take major amounts of CBD and THC to keep the seizures away, are spending thousands a month without proper medical support like we have if they were to give that child some other devastating seizure drug. If they take the normal seizure drugs that weren't working They get it all paid for. They go to marijuana. It's coming out of their pockets, or the goodness of the heart of the dispensary that tries to reduce the price for them. There's still taxes applied to medical. There's no product identification number for it medically. There are so many things that need to be fixed in the medical world. And yes, lots more research so we can get better at take all the good items and take away the bad, just burning green, and get into a place where they can actually prescribe certain mixes of chemicals together that will solve certain issues we have. Yes, it's anecdotal now. It won't be in the future. Let's move on to the next story. And I want to thank you all for listening to me on that. I'm going to have a little bit of my God Bud, and we're going to move to the next story. Right now I'm just waiting for the page to load because it's I hate giving you these kind of things. It's not a good source. A whole bunch of videos start playing when you go to this independent.co.uk. But it's a good story because I'm bringing you another good story. And I really love this. So let's put the story there. There it is. Medical cannabis in the United Kingdom. What does the legalization mean, and how will it help patients? Hooray! Finally, just as Australia did last year, I think it was, the UK has finally bit the bullet and said, we will be bringing medical cannabis. This story goes on quite a bit to talk about how they're going to start moving forward and what people have to do. So I'm really not going to read the story. I'm going to give you the link below, and I encourage those of you who are interested or know someone who's interested, share the story with them. It's good news. And this is a segue from this previous story, because you also have to question those stories when you hear Canada might phase out their medical. You got to question it. You got to say, hold it. Medical has been in Canada since the 80s, has moved to 27 or 28 of the US states, maybe more. Recreational is legal in Canada in October, and in 6 of the US states. There are many countries that have moved to medical cannabis, and Canada supplies a fair amount of them. And the UK secretly grows as a government and supplies medical cannabis to quite a few countries. So it's about time they got it. So this snowball is too big. It isn't going to stop. It just isn't. So that's that story. And now we go to US. Welcome to Oklahoma. Discover the excellence. My friends from Oklahoma, or those who know people from there, it's still going to be a little while, but you had enough signatories, and medical marijuana is going on the ballot. Probably not this round, but it's going on the ballot, so it will be able to get voted on, and it'll be dug into the Constitution as a right because it's medical. So that's what this story is. There's not a lot to read below because it's very preliminary. It's probably 2 years before they get their medical, but it's a start, and yay, the amount I hear from people in the US and comments in my videos who say, I just wish I lived in a medical state. I could use it so badly. I hate what I'm on, but it helps a little bit. We need to push this. We need to share this. We need to expand its reach even more. It's exponential, and it's going to keep growing. And the next story, Alberta Cannabis Company opens a concept store in Edmonton. That's a little bit of a picture of the store. And what it is Edmonton-based Fire and Flower are planning on quite a few stores throughout Alberta, and I think beyond, but they're an Alberta-based company. And because they're sitting in the wait, wondering, you can play the video below. There's no sense me doing it for you. But while they're sitting in the wait, waiting for, did they get authorized? Do they get a license? Can they open October 17th, 2018? They are actually pre-building some of these stores so that they have a better chance of getting approved. And so those who are doing the approving can see what they're going to be doing. They can't yet, while they cannot yet sell cannabis, the company hopes their concept store will give them an advantage as they apply to open more stores across the province. They say, for us, creating the store you see around you today was really important. It shows our regulators what a store will look like. The company plans on opening 10 locations across Edmonton and 37 across the province of Alberta, but to do so, they must rise above a pool with over 700 applications. There are a lot of companies wanting to do this. I've seen the amount of stores being proposed throughout Alberta, and they're starting to work on giving those licenses so people can be ready for October. So it's really cool. It's really exciting. It's growing. It's getting there. It won't be, I agree with those naysayers, it won't be the perfect panacea of freedom that some of us have hoped for. It won't be, not yet. It's going to take a while to prove how safe this really is. As the years go by, the regulations will decrease, the access will increase, the quality, the price, everything's going to improve. We'll go back to this one in a couple of years and maybe I can play it and say, we got there. We got there. And the last story, a fun story, just something fun. Hang on a second. Cheers. This is a fun story. Can you get a second-hand high? Contact highs, are they real? I shared this a couple of days ago and I said yes and no, because it does state yes you can, but no, not really. The way that they studied this, and I find it kind of funny, researchers started with 12 people. This is right here. 6 cannabis smokers and 6 non-smokers. In the first experiment, all 12 subjects spent an hour together in a small unventilated room, during which time each smoker went through 10 joints. Excuse me. Afterward, the non-smokers reported feeling pleasant, more tired and less alert. And sure enough, their blood and urine tests came up positive for THC. In the second experiment, they repeated the same scenario, but this time in a room with ventilation. The non-smokers in this experiment later said they felt hungry, but none of them tested positive for THC. This is not a great study. This is more anecdotal evidence than anything, but it's cool. It's cool to understand that in that little bit of an environment, people who didn't smoke but were breathing the smoke on a consistent basis, yes, they got some THC in them. But if you're just walking by, it does conclude right at the bottom of this. If you're just walking by and you smell it, or there's a cloud near you and you smell it, you're not going to get a contact high. It takes a lot more than that. And it does go on to talk about, is the THC active after cannabis smoke is exhaled? Yes, it is. But how much of it is in there? Your lungs will take approximately 50% of the THC that you breathe in. So you're breathing out only 50% left. In a big, huge cloud that a person might get a little tiny piece of. So the amount that they're getting, if they get any smell at all is minute and microscopic. But it's a good story, and it's fun, and I hope you enjoy it. And I just really like the video, and I hope you'll play it. So, my friends, I go back to the big old hippie, and I want to thank all of you. This channel has been growing quite nicely. I want to thank you for your thumbs up. I want to thank you for your patronage. I want to thank you for just listening and clicking along with me, giving me something to do with my Sunday to share it with all of you, and we learn together. We aren't done learning any of these stories because we're going to continue talking below in the comments, and we'll keep learning, and you share and we share, and next week we'll talk more about it. Probably not next week. There probably won't be a hippie news next Sunday because my boy is home and I will be spending that day with him somewhere in the mountains, somewhere on a drive, somewhere. Peace and cheers, friends. Love and harmony. I hope you don't see anybody without a smile today. But if you do, give them one of yours. It's beautiful.